So welcome everyone. Well, you heard the beginning of the conversation. So today, this is the fourth meeting of this cycle of workshops online about approaching the US ecosystem. The workshops are dedicated to our clusters, incubators, and our technopoles. And actually the idea is helping them to connect with the American ecosystem. In this particular case today, we are going to talk about incubators and accelerators, and we're going to share three different experiences that could help the participants to better understand incubators and accelerators in the US and how to approach them, for their startups, but even if they want to start some new projects or partnership. So the three speakers we have are George Panagiotakopoulos, from SkyDeck Accelerator, University of California, Berkeley. He's the Director of Global Innovation and Partnership. Then Andrea Zorzetto, who is Managing Partner for Italy, a Plug and Play. And Andrea Parmeggiani from Fondazione REI Reggio Emilia, who actually came to Silicon Valley in 2018 as an incubator from Emilia-Romagna region to meet some of this practice in Silicon Valley. So the idea, as I was saying, is to give the participants an idea about yourself and about your organization, and underline how your organization could support Italian startups, in particular Emilia-Romagna startups, and even other actors from our ecosystem. I will ask Andrea Parmeggiani to tell us something about the experience he had in Silicon Valley, and in particular what he learned from this experience. So I'll ask George to start, and to the others, feel free to ask questions at any time. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleasure to meet everyone. My name is George Panagiotakopoulos. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Global Innovation and Partnerships at Berkeley SkyDeck. And what that means more specifically is my job is to expand our program, take it internationally, and identify new and innovative ways of collaborating with corporate partners, government organizations, academic institutions, to ensure that our startups have the best chances for success. That said, Berkeley SkyDeck is a program of UC Berkeley. We're not a partner, we're not an affiliate. We sit directly under the Office of Research, and we accelerate approximately 300 startups per year through three different programs. The first program we call the cohort. That's where we collaborate with a fund that invests in seed stage startups, roughly, in exchange for equity, and we accelerate those startups through a 6-month program. The second program we call Pad 13. That is where we accept approximately 100 startups twice per year. All terms are spring and fall, and 2 terms per year. We accept approximately 100 that are UC affiliates and accelerate them through a 6-month incubation program. And then a third program is the Global Innovation Program. And this is where we collaborate with the government organizations, academic institutions, and corporations that are interested in accelerating startups to our program to receive a soft landing into Silicon Valley, get connected with the university, and obtain a network of investors, corporate partners, and advisors to help them throughout their journey. Now, the way we do this is to, as with any accelerator, a robust curriculum, and connect them with a robust ecosystem of resources to infuse them with everything they need along their journey. one of the things that is a particular note and kind of differentiates us is that we are a university-based accelerator, which means that all startups that join SkyDeck join a program of UC Berkeley, which means they become affiliates. So all our startups get an @berkeley.edu email address so they can connect with all faculty, research departments, Office of Intellectual Property, School of Business, College of Engineering. It really brings them into the ecosystem so they can take advantage of all the resources at the university. I would say at a very high level, our approach is very practical. It's not as educational as you might think. For example, we don't do case studies on how Tesla succeeded or what they did. We're far more, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to structure yourself. This is what your funding plan needs to look like. This is what your product story needs to be. This is what investors are looking for. This is what they want to hear. This is what they don't want to hear. So we're very, very practical in that approach. Now, there's so much to talk about, and I'm trying to keep this as relevant to this conversation as possible. How we work with startups from all over the world. Well, we host a global application twice per year, in spring and the fall, for all 3 programs. And sometimes we work with corporations to co-host applications based on, an event or a challenge or an open innovation competition that they're having. We have global strategic partners that include universities and government organizations through which we host all over the world, through which we host these applications. And we receive anywhere between 1,200 and 2,000 applications per term. We go through them and really try to search for the best startups and the ones that we can help and really help be a launch pad for them. What the future looks like for us? Well, we are expanding. We'll be announcing some exciting collaborative engagements and expansions into other regions and other countries around the world by the end of this year, and some others by the spring of next year. And I believe another one of the topics was how startups should approach the ecosystem in the US. I think through collaborating with a notable accelerator or incubator, whether it's SkyDeck or Plug and Play who we have here today, I think these organizations are really geared and fine-tuned to really help startups succeed. Which one you go for just depends on what you're looking to do, but you really can't go wrong. Now, there's so many other ways and directions I could take this conversation, but I think that's a pretty okay high level introduction, and then we can do a deep dive into any one of these topics that you prefer.
Thank you, George. Andrea? Zorzetto?
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me now. Thanks, Sarah, for the invitation, of course, and nice to be on the panel with everyone else. And so I'm the managing partner for Plug and Play in Italy, where we launched in 2019. As you might know, Plug and Play is a Silicon Valley-based company. We basically do 2 things. We invest in early-stage startups, and then we work with the world's largest corporations to match them with startups that are looking for clients to grow. These are the 2 activities. In both activities, we're a leader internationally. So in terms of investments, that's how Plug and Play started, when in the Lucky Building in Silicon Valley, our founder hosted Google and PayPal, then invested in them and also in Dropbox. And nowadays, we don't invest much in terms of capital because it's 100,000 the average, 100K, the average of our tickets. But we do 200 of them each year. So it's very early stage, but for early stage startups, we're one of the most active investors worldwide. And we have more than 20 unicorns in our portfolio. And for what regards our open innovation activities, we basically have a 2-sided platform, corporates and startups. It is the corporates that fund our activities. So we don't take any equity or fees from the startups. And we ask the corporates what their challenges are, what their objectives are in terms of innovation. And then we go and find the best startups anywhere in the world that can do that and work with those corporates. And we do this across any kind of industry in more than 20 countries. And we've grown our platform now to more than 40 cities worldwide. And 500 are the corporate partners or Plug and Play. And just to say a few words, of course, also about what we do in Italy. So we launched in 2019 in Milan with a food vertical. And then last year, we also added fintech and sustainability. I'm very happy to say that Emilia-Romagna was the second region where we landed. So we opened this year in Modena, the Motor Valley Accelerator, together with CDP, UniCredit, Fondazione di Modena, and CRIT, and a host of corporate partners. And with Arthur and Emilia-Romagna, we also hosted some of their startups before in Silicon Valley. So it's a close relationship. And what can we do for Italian startups? Well, basically what I was saying at the beginning. So we can be an investor, one of the first ones, that connects them also with international VCs. And we can be the platform where they scale and they find clients if they're a B2B business.
Good evening to everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I was on the 2019 trip for the incubators manager, and we visited a number of incubator accelerators, incubation outposts, and the university and TTO, technology transfer offices. It was really eye-opening. Previous to this mission, I had been on the board of a startup that we have moved to the Silicon Valley for about 3 years, but I never went there during that stint. So I had an understanding, but I did not realize how pervasive it was the ecosystem in the area. So visiting in person gave me a chance to add relationship and have a better working understanding of how things work in Silicon Valley. The mission was very well organized. Our hosts were really able to make us understand what we're seeing and how things interrelated, and how many different flavors of presence and organization they have in Silicon Valleys. For international corporations, global corporations, for regional offices, on top of the accelerator incubators, locally accelerator incubators. So Plug and Play was one of the highlights of the visit, and it's definitely impressing the number and the quality of the startups they have behind the reception desk, the roster of startups, and even more impressive was the first floor where they have the office of the corporations, and that's I think it's a sign that their cooperation between startup and corporation really works. Another takeaway was the visit to SkyDeck. We have both of them here, but when I visit the SkyDeck, I've seen that they have startups there, people working with hardware. There were like automated delivery vehicle, another round of startups. And that's really struck my imagination. And we want to have a startup incubator in Reggio Emilia. So when we needed to talk to an organization that could give us an international footprint, we turned to George. So based on the trip that we did, I've seen SkyDeck. Then thanks to Arthur and the regional ecosystem, I had a chance to talk to George in one of the remote visits. And then now that we have an opportunity, I've talked to George, and we're bringing that along. So if I wouldn't have been there, I think I wouldn't have been able to mobilize and to start discussing this relationship. So definitely worth going.
Sure. I mean, there's so many different collaborative engagements that we have. One, model that we have is where we collaborate with a few different universities from around the world that have their own incubation program. And it's mostly for maybe idea stage or pre-seed stage startups. And they have the capacity to accelerate anywhere between 10 and 30. And every year they want to select 2 to 5, maybe even 1 that they believe is in a position that's ready to join an accelerator with more robust resources and greater connections to an investor network or an advisor network. And they choose to send 1 or 2 or 5 of those startups to us every term. So that's one way that we're helping source strong startups that really need the resources to plug them into the Silicon Valley ecosystem, while also helping an academic institution kind of build upon their ecosystem. So we'll do what we do best, which is accelerate startups. They can do what they do best, which is incubate startups relevant to their local ecosystem, giving them the resources that they need there. There's a lot of nuances that they can tailor their program around. And together we just help create in aggregate a more robust innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem. So that's just one example out of many. And we have similar engagements with corporations that have kind of their own in-house incubator and are looking for other opportunities to grow and expand their products or services, or kind of pivot what they're currently working on. Many different areas many other examples and many other areas to talk about, but that's just one example, or a couple rather.
No, that is a great question. I mean, of course, startups and corporates are the center of the ecosystem we've built, but there's many more actors that are involved. And I mean, on the one side, you have those that provide startups in a way. So universities is a big stakeholder for us. We've had dozens of partnerships with universities in the United States, and also we're building a similar network in Europe. But then also it's very important for us to connect with other investors. So whether it is VCs, angels networks, foundations, government funds, these, as you know, are all interested in investing in startups at the moment. So it's important for us to bring them on board onto the ecosystem. And of course, we've been working also with a number of government agencies such as Arthur, but also from many countries around the world. As Plug and Play Italy now, we're also working with the Qatar Foundation for an educational program to their startups, and we work with Korean, Taiwanese, German agencies that send their startups to Silicon Valley, like Emilia-Romagna did. And so it just shows the variety of players that are involved. And for example, as I was saying before, in the Motor Valley Accelerator, there's the government fund, GDP, together with us, key investors like the Fondazione di Modena and UniCredit. And we also have this local technology transfer center, CREAT, that is working with us. So, and also then, of course, the startups and the corporate partners. So there's really a huge variety of stakeholders. What I like to stress, and what we also tell these stakeholders all the time, is that, of course, these ecosystems are built around startups, and it's important that they're at the center. And of course, corporates are those that provide the demand for B2B startups. So it's important that the startups meet their challenges, and everyone else is there to support this ecosystem. But it's important now that more bureaucratic or top-down structures like banks or governments get involved. They understand that the logics of the startup ecosystem are different, and they try to adapt rather than impose their way of doing things on the startups.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. When we came back, that's what I didn't mention earlier on, we set up INER. It's a network, a bottom-up network of local incubator and accelerators, because the first thing an incubator has to have before, talking to an incubator accelerator in the US is size, because otherwise it doesn't, let's say, make sense. It doesn't pay back all the effort you put in the relationship either ways. It can be only a touch and go. While as inner, although each incubator is very small, we can be a bigger organization which feeds more opportunity and gets more back from a US incubator. We've just discussed with George, I'm not saying anything, let's say, a membership in their network, which is worth taking if you represent a number of a demand, a tangible demand. So on our side, get ready before addressing them. You can get relationship, you can get a very hands-on approach. As Andrea was saying, also the universities are very different. We've seen very strong alumni entrepreneurship organizations and really aggressive transfer office, which are more sales office than tech transfer offices. So there are really a lot of opportunity. You have to have scale. So my recommendation would not to approach one by one, but to network before approaching them. Now we just approached SkyDeck with an opportunity, but because we have a corporation, we're just acting, let's say, as a corporate office for the large corporation. But otherwise, we couldn't have done it by ourselves.
I fully agree. I mean, it's Andrea said it best. Yeah, you definitely need to network. It was pretty all-encompassing. Relevant to how to approach the ecosystem, I don't think there's one way there. I don't think there's one thing you need to do. You need to kind of jump into the pool, as they say. You need to start networking, start, having conversations, start, reaching out to, Plug and Play and SkyDeck and all the accelerators that you're interested in. You need to research the startups that have gone through those programs and, what their success cases look like, why they succeeded, what ecosystems that you need to be a part of to ensure your chances for success. What does Plug and Play's ecosystem look like? What does SkyDeck's ecosystem look like? Where do we believe there are the greatest chances for us to flourish? I don't think it's a one-stop journey for startups. Startups need to kind of vacuum in as many resources and opportunities as they can. They have the talent, they're going to have the resources. They also need to be a little lucky. They need to meet the right people. And, it's about time and place. So more is better. And Andrea said it best. He said they need to do the research, and I would just add, they need to jump into the pool. And, it's kind of sink or swim.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I guess you need both, right, to do some research and understand where to turn to in terms of what business, what sector you're in, what's your stage, what country you're looking at. So there's many things you have to understand, and also what's the model of the accelerator incubator that might help you. But at the same time, there's so much that you're not going to learn until you actually go out and talk to people and gather feedback and also insights from other people within the ecosystem. So yeah, I guess in lean approach, should be the bread and butter of a startup. Have an idea, but also then go out and test it and learn from what you hear.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Right. Okay. So, I believe you said one of the questions was, how are we expanding abroad? Oh, well, there are a couple ways. One is we're expanding our physical footprint, and we will be establishing a satellite office in Europe. I can't say exactly where yet, and by the spring of 2022. That is our goal. And what we look for in our expansion is, we're a public university and we're a nonprofit. So it's not about profit. It's not about Valeria, if we expand and create this collaboration. How much can you pay us? How much can you do this? It's not about that. Everything that SkyDeck does has to serve the mission of the university. And the mission of the university is to, generate knowledge towards a social benefit and social impact for the greater good, and offer research opportunities and educational opportunities to the students and to the researchers, faculty at the university. And so we look for mutually beneficial relationships that can seed those opportunities to the university. And, obviously our partner benefits by also connecting with our network. So it's really an accretive ecosystem that we're looking to develop. So it's slow and steady and very, very value driven. So one way, as I mentioned, is we're actually expanding our physical footprint. The other way is expanding just the network of, academic institutions and government organizations and even corporations that we work with that want to help bring strong startups, in front of us to get visibility and that can apply to our program, or that they want a sponsor to send to our program to get accelerated, or that want to connect with university resources. I wouldn't say that I've seen weaknesses that, and I'm not, just trying to be neutral. I haven't noticed trending weaknesses from Italian startups or, African startups or Chinese startups or American startups. It's a team effort. It's a collaborative engagement. I will say typically what I've noticed, the thing that really kind of helps the U.S. provide greater opportunities to startups from other countries is in the U.S. we have a really high risk tolerance. We are willing to take risky bets and willing to invest more money, whereas as you start to go east in the world, towards Europe, risk tolerance is lower, and startups also start to think a little smaller. They start to think of the local expansion, regional expansion, domestic expansion. And if it gets a little broader, maybe European expansion. Startups typically, in the US, they think of, let's launch in the US, or sometimes they say, let's launch in an industry because geography doesn't matter. So typically, sometimes as you go further east, startups start to think a little smaller, which is less attractive. And they're also a little bit more conservative, which, is not the model in the US. But yeah, I couldn't say that's a weakness of Italian startups or, startups from specific countries. We've had many, great and successful Italian startups from Italy.
Yeah, no, I start from the second also because I very much agree with what George said. So, of course, the whole ecosystem, people in general, have more appetite for risk in the United States. And in Europe, that's lower appetite. And in Italy, it's maybe even lower compared to the average. And I remember once we had our CEO speak an event with a few key Italian stakeholders. And he was saying, Italy is actually a very rich country, right? Because we're, in terms of private wealth, we're one of the top ones worldwide. But we don't invest barely anything in risky ventures, right? And so surely the Italian ecosystem, like the whole of Europe, needs to invest more. And of course, we're going to lose money, but we're also going to make a lot of money. That was his message coming from a US perspective. But when you look at startups specifically, again, as George said, they're not always as ambitious. They don't look at as much as a big market as they do in the United States. Of course, when you're in the United States or also China and India, you have the advantage that your home market is huge. Unfortunately, in Europe, Europe is a large continent, but every time you want to open a branch or bring your startup to another country, it's a different language, different culture, different regulation, labor law. So it's pretty different and difficult to scale starting from Europe. But of course, we also have the counter examples of startups in countries like Israel, which is has a tiny home market, but from day one, they think global of how to sell globally. And so, yeah, we do see Italian startups that are ambitious, that speak the language of American VCs, of the American ecosystem, but there are still too few. We still see so many startups in Italy that maybe the founder is a great engineer or a great person with a technical background, but they don't They don't couple this with strong business skills, or sometimes they target very niche markets, or the products are not very scalable. Italy, I think, has a very strong entrepreneurial DNA, but it's more linked to the artisan culture that we've always had of producing beautiful products, not caring so much about scaling up to huge markets. So on that, Italy really has to improve. But on the bright side, I think now that the digital transformation is encompassing every vertical, also the most traditional industries. And so startups are becoming the way to do innovation, not just in the digital world, but also in food, health, real estate, manufacturing, energy, aerospace, whatever. Then countries like Italy that have a very strong industrial track record can catch up. And so, in terms of enterprise software, cybersecurity, I really can't see Italian startups compete with American ones or Israeli ones. But in things like, again, manufacturing, energy, aerospace, automotive, where we have such a strong history, that's where we can play a part and be world leaders. And in terms of global expansion, yeah, Plug and Play has been doing that for a while, of course, compared to SkyDeck. We are a for-profit, but it's also part of our mission to build these programs everywhere. And what we're seeing is a clear trend that 10 years ago it was the US, 5-6 years ago it was the largest countries like Germany, Japan, France, and now 2-3 years ago we went to third-tier ecosystems, if you want, including Italy. And after COVID, there's a new phase. So we're opening developing markets like Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, Brazil, Thailand, and within larger markets like Germany or Japan, we're opening in second, third-tier cities. So we are really seeing startup ecosystems spreading everywhere, which I think is very good news.
Yeah, and I wanted to just add to that, it's thinking bigger for the startups isn't as difficult. It's not always difficult. It's not that you just have to compound all your efforts. Like every big startup started small. Every company needs its first customer before its 1 millionth customer. Every startup needs to figure out who their beachhead customer is, right? And in the past, companies were thinking of having geographically segmented groups of beachhead customers. But today you can think of an industry as your beachhead, or your market segment as your beachhead, or demographic as your beachhead. Like these are all like new approaches that you can take. So like if your product does, let's say, asset tracking, it may be better for you to specialize in an industry rather than a country first. Because like, for example, tracking two things like, bottles and cookies just in the US is harder than just tracking bottles globally. Bottle tracking in the US is very similar to bottle tracking in South Africa, which is very similar to bottle tracking in Europe. So national boundaries are, in many cases, less important than industry boundaries. And that's one of the things that we try to kind of teach the startups, help them understand, and kind of helps them reframe their approach to, like a global first approach or a domestic first approach, depending on what they're doing. Right. So what we have is our curriculum. So we have our core programming. We have two things. For starters, we have our core programming, and our core programming is your basic how to scale a business from 0 to 1. It talks about your product story, your market, how to develop market traction, team development, business modeling, fundraising plan, design and prototyping, etc. And then we provide customized programming for all our startups. So if your startup is a biotech startup that is specialized in working with a specific type of bacteria that does something super unique or works with certain proteins, we'll develop that workshop for you, or we'll bring in that advisor or that expert to help you specific to that. And the reason we can do that is because as we're part of the university, we have a lot of resources. So to answer your question now more succinctly, we have our core programming, which is all the business aspects that you need. And then we have our specialized programming that we infuse into that for each startup to ensure that they have the resources they need, the content they need.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I totally agree with you. They're both super important. Funding for a startup is the way to finance everything and kickstart the business. But of course, the reason a B2B startup is created is to solve a problem of other businesses, right? That's by definition. And of course, you need those clients to validate your solution. So in a lean way, the first thing you want to find out if the solution you have in mind makes sense and how to improve it. And of course, because you want to grow as much as possible, getting the first success cases so you can show to other corporates, as you said, that the solution works and it gets in traction and you can expand. So that's precisely what we try to do through our network. And on the other hand, of course, we see the other face of the medal, if you want, the other face of the coin, like the corporates compared to 20, 30 years ago cannot innovate internally only anymore, right? Because there's so much innovation happening around everywhere, and startups are leaner than bigger corporates to bring new products and services to market. And so what we do is, of course, trying to enlarge as much as possible our network of corporate partners so that startups can have the widest range possible of clients. And it's bi-directional. You have to push sometimes the solution, the new service of the startup to the corporates, and many times it's the corporate that says, I have this problem, find a solution for me. So that's how Plug and Play works. And what we've seen is, what the educational part, the mentorship, the funding, all of those things are of course critical, especially at the beginning of the life of a startup. You can always learn as a founder, but in the first 6-12 months, you need more of a hands-on support. Instead, finding clients from the early stage to forever, basically, is very important. And that's why our model is quite stage agnostic. We take in those startups that are still early stage and need to validate, but we also take those Series D startups that are by now scale-ups, that they don't need as much mentorship and workshops anymore, but they still need to find clients, maybe in new markets. So that's exactly what Plug and Play does. It's an interesting question what you asked about B2C. Also curious to hear what George and Andrea think about it. Of course, the consumer market has different dynamics. And when you want to bring, a new platform, a new app to the market, then it's you don't need a filter. You need to find a way to go direct to your consumers. But I guess in a intermediate way, what we've seen is sometimes we have some of our clients that are B2C, like retailers. Think of Gallery Lafayette in France or Esselunga. And so a B2C or D2C startups that is interesting to find the end clients might want to work through those corporates to get there. So that's how we can support in that case. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Maybe I can take the first question and leave the second to someone else. So, of course, food is the first vertical we launched in Italy. And so it's the first food vertical that Plug and Play created outside of Silicon Valley. So I would say that it is attractive to the US, but how is it attractive? I think in terms of, finding business clients for B2B startups, yes, for sure. For example, because you asked for one, Bext 360 is a Denver-based startup that uses blockchain to track what happens to food products from basically the farm to fork. And they did a very interesting pilot with Esselunga on cacao, which is also out, and you can check out the video. It's very interesting case. And the other way that I would say that Italy is very attractive to the US food industry is, of course, that in terms of packaging and manufacturing, especially in Emilia-Romagna, we have an incredible know-how. And so, maybe you're a startup that has an innovative product, but you need the machinery or the packaging, and Italy is definitely very interesting place to go. For example, one of our first partners in Milan was Tetra Pak, which is a Swedish company, but their main R&D center worldwide is in Italy. And even in Silicon Valley, our colleagues were working through the Modena center. So in these two ways, B2B and also finding suppliers of manufacturing and packaging, I'd say it's attractive. When it comes to food product innovation, so B2C, because of many reasons that you know better than me, if you want to launch alternative meat, alternative dairy products, not even compared to the US, but even compared to the Nordics or countries like France and the UK that have huge capital with a lot of young affluent people that are looking for new things. Italy is not the best market. We're a country of small towns, quite old and traditional on average. So for B2C, definitely as attractive than the other two, I'd say.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a big topic, but I mean, again, geographies are giving away to technology relative to, like the food industry and agri-tech. The whole track and trace thing is of super importance. People want to be more conscientious eaters. They want to be more aware. They want to be more considerate of, their personal ethos and morals of what they consume and where it comes from. And if you think about just like the food system, the goal of the industrialization of food ecosystems has usually been about pushing down costs through industrialization, homogenization. But now we're seeing a transformation of costs through information technology rather than production costs. It's allowing more efficient matching of supply and demand, such as making inventory tech more efficient, which solves food waste. So if you're making a super boutique organic herb now, there's little chance you can get this to a few people around the world without throwing most of it out. However, now with greater efficiencies with food distribution and information tech, this is offering more menu complexity. I can now open up my cupboard and I have food from all around the world due to these tech solutions, even if it's just a small local grower in a village in Greece, for example. In the wine industry, there are over 8 million SKUs in the wine business. That's a lot of wine. The complexity of wine is such that there was more push for the industrialization of wine, but with companies like Vivino, which help people navigate that complexity, these 8 million SKUs can find their way into every single market, every single home more easily. So, it's helping us rethink borders and rethink, availability, because the tech is just revolutionizing the supply chain. I don't know if that answers your question. I know it's slightly tangential, but I think it is also kind of relevant.
So thank you very, very much, George, Andrea.
Of course, please, you're more than welcome to share my contact information. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me, and great meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So from my side as well, and I'm available for anyone who wants to contact me and have some insight of what's happening in Silicon Valley from Reggio Emilia.
Yeah, and thanks also from my side. Very nice to meet George, Andrea, and everyone. And I mean, as Plug and Play, in Italy, Emilia-Romagna is one of the key regions for us. Happy to visit your incubators, technopoles, or spaces. So feel free to share my contact, Sarah, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you.